being mean to lousy educators, but let's actually identify the lousy ones. And let's make sure we're identifying the good ones. Let's not just use the closest measurement stick we can find at hand. Merit pay systems. We got merit pay systems, which are, if you're a 4th grade teacher and you got a reading specialist who teach your kids reading all day, but your scores go up, right now we're talking about merit pay systems in this country, which are still going to give you a bonus as a good teacher. You know what? We just ought to have merit pay systems that actually reflect the work that you're doing if we're going to reward them. So one is just think about, business has been doing these things for half a century, for a century. What are the things we know about how you do accountability smart? About how do you reward good employees? Let's make sure they're being used. Flip side, there's something called the 65% solution. It says 65% of all school dollars ought to be spent in the classroom. This is not the favorite strategy of Walmart or FedEx or UPS. They don't see how much money they can put into their trucks or their stores. They understand that it's kind of the backbone of the operations to game. So rather than pass simple one-size-fits-all solutions, or like class size, let's think about how do we make sure that dollars are being spent in ways that are effective. Again, people frequently push these ideas by alluding to business analogies. It's the opportunity for the business community to stand up and say, hey guys, you're interpreting this wrong. All right, there's 3 examples which actually we could talk about if we want, but we don't need to wade into them now. Joel Klein in New York has done some of this stuff terrifically. John Deasy's a great example. And I mentioned a couple things that Michelle Rhee has done. But with that, why don't we just actually go ahead and open it up for questions. Okay.
Well, there's hardly anything to talk about here, is there? Dr. Hess, you went through your presentation and we saw NCLB up there, but we didn't hear any remarks at all about race to the top and money that's out there right now. What is your opinion of what's going on around the nation? And there seems to be a little pullback from some states and some public policy people about whether or not that's the best idea.
Yeah, so there's race to the top, as most of you are probably familiar with, and no chill left behind too. If folks, I'm used to speaking education audiences sometimes. We use our little lingo and forget that other people have real lives and other distractions. But No Chill Left Behind has been with us for 9 years, so I tend to think everybody's heard of it. Race to the Top was part of the stimulus plan last year. We put about $120 billion into education. The narrow, tiny wedge of that was supposed to drive reform was $5 billion given to the Secretary of Education for 2 programs. One for innovation, $650 million. Second, for Race to the Top, $4.35 billion to encourage states to pursue 4 congressional priorities around data systems and turnarounds and teacher quality. Well, right now, what's happening is Wisconsin Representative David Obey is trying to take a ding out of Race to the Top because a bunch of progressives in the Democratic caucus are kind of ticked off with the Obama administration and feel that it's been beaten up on the teacher unions too much, and they're trying to spank them a little bit. So they've attached this to a supplemental bill for funding the war in Afghanistan. It's unlikely to go anywhere in the Senate. Even Obey said it's not going anywhere in the Senate. The bigger fight has been, is Race to the Top a good idea? And what I would suggest is, generally, folks who think and talk like I do say yes. And part of me really likes Race to the Top, but Race to the Top is actually 2 programs, one of which I like and the other of which I think is dumb. Race to the Top, those 4 congressional directives became 19 priorities as developed by Race to the Top director Joanne Weiss. For those 19 priorities, states competed for a total of 500 points. If you look at those 500 points, some of it, I think, is terrific opportunities of using the federal carrot to help states kick out anachronistic policies. States have data firewalls, which were put in place in the 70s at the behest of the teacher unions. A data firewall says that as you collect student test scores, you're not allowed to use any of it to evaluate teachers. Well, that's a problem. If you're a superintendent in a district and you want to use it, you're not allowed. I'm in favor of letting people who want to use data use data. It also rewarded states for lifting or creating charter schools or lifting caps doesn't say you have to have charter schools. It says you got to create the opportunity for people to use them. But these kinds of opportunity-creating elements only account for about a quarter of Race to the Top. About 3/4 of Race to the Top, by my calculation, is what I think is kind of the same old blah, blah best practices. It's telling states that the feds want them to engage in certain approved professional development practices. It wants them to use certain kinds of turnaround models. It wants them to spend more money on K-12. And essentially, it's a case of not using this carrot to encourage states to create room for people to solve problems, but encouraging states, much like No Child Left Behind did, to adopt the preferred reforms of the moment. And unfortunately, I think when we see, particularly from the round one winners, Delaware and Tennessee, which were most notable for the buy-in from the teacher unions, I think we've seen very much that let's do the things where we can hold hands and sing Kumbaya and agree about for the moment. I think that has been by far the greater strand of Race to the Top.